If a case survives long enough, it stops belonging to evidence. It starts belonging to repetition. A name said so many times, it hardens into folklore. A city that learns how to sell the route. A killer who becomes easier to picture than the people he actually killed. That is what happened to Jack the Ripper. For more than a century, the case has existed in an unstable space between archive and entertainment, police files, press hysteria, Victorian prejudice, modern obsession, and when a case lives that long, every new clue arrives with the same dangerous promise, that this time, finally, history will close. Now, recent reporting has revived that promise again. A walking stick linked to Detective Frederick Aberline, one of the lead investigators in 1888, has re-entered public view. Carved into it, according to that reporting, is a face said to be based on witness testimony, a possible composite of the man London never identified. And alongside that image, an author and former police volunteer, Sarah Bax Horton, has renewed her argument that the killer was a Whitechapel cigar maker named Hyam Hyams. Not proven, not settled, not case closed, but enough to reopen the oldest question in modern true crime. What if the world's most famous unidentified killer was not hidden by lack of clues alone, but by the fact that the legend outgrew the case? Jack the Ripper is often described as the most famous unsolved case in criminal history. What matters is not just that the killer was never identified. It is that the murders happened at the exact moment mass circulation newspapers were capable of turning a local series of killings into national obsession. London Museum notes that the murders drew frenzied newspaper attention, spread fear across London, and shocked the country. The National Archives also preserves the flood of letters tied to the case, including the infamous correspondence signed Jack the Ripper, now widely treated as hoax material rather than reliable evidence from the killer himself. That distinction matters, because the identity of Jack the Ripper was never simply discovered by investigators. It was constructed in public, by headlines, by rumor, by letters, by sketches, by fear. Even the name itself came through the machinery of publicity. So, before the case became a historical mystery, it became something else first, a media event, and that may be the real reason it never died. The murders happened in and around Whitechapel, in London's East End, in the autumn of 1888. London Museum describes the city at that time as wealthy, modernizing, and deeply unequal. It notes that Whitechapel was one of the poorest districts in East London, shaped by overcrowding, strained sanitation, and relentless poverty. On Charles Booth's poverty map, much of the area appears in black and dark blue categories associated with severe poverty and what Victorian reformers called the semi-criminal poor. This is the part of the case that gets flattened when the story is told like Gothic entertainment. Because the murders did not emerge from fog alone, they emerged from conditions. Crowded lodging houses, unstable work, alcohol, street sleeping, women living one missed payment away from hunger. History describes the East End as a place viewed with both compassion and contempt, notorious in the Victorian imagination for squalor, violence, and crime. But even that old language has to be handled carefully because it reflects the prejudice of the era as much as the reality on the ground. Entity shadows-wise, this is where the horror actually is, not just that a killer found victims there, but that an advanced imperial capital had already created an environment where vulnerability was ordinary. The system did not fail after the murders. In many ways, it had failed first. Modern accounts often refer to the canonical five. That phrase matters because it is not the same thing as certainty. Britannica and London Museum both identify the 5 women most commonly linked by police and later tradition to one killer: Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Nichols was found on August 31, 1888, Chapman on September 8, Stride and Eddowes on the same night, September 30, Kelly on November 9, but even here, the case resists simplification. Some researchers have argued over whether all 5 should be grouped together so cleanly. Others dispute whether all 5 should automatically be described as prostitutes. And the broader Whitechapel murders file included additional women killed in the same general period, some of whom were investigated in relation to the same panic. So the clean version of the case is this: 5 murders are most commonly treated as the core Ripper sequence. The killer was never identified. And the basic story everyone thinks they know has always contained more uncertainty than popular culture likes to admit. The newest development in the story is not DNA, not a confession, not a forensic breakthrough in the modern sense. It is an object. Recent reporting in Popular Mechanics, drawing on New York Post reporting and images credited to the College of Policing, says a custom walking stick, once owned by Frederick Aberline, had long been kept at the old police college in Bramshill and was feared lost after the site closed in 2015. The article says the cane resurfaced when staff searched memorabilia at the College of Policing's headquarters in Brighton, and that it is now displayed to illustrate advances in police technology. Why this matters is not that the cane solves the murders. It does not. Why it matters is that, according to that reporting, Aberline had carved into the cane a facial image based on witness testimony presented as the only surviving composite-style likeness associated with the original investigation. That is a powerful detail, because Jack the Ripper has survived for generations as a voice, a knife, a rumor, a silhouette, not a face. This object changes that, or at least, it claims to. And that is exactly why it is dangerous, because once a mystery receives a face, people stop asking whether the face is reliable. They start asking whether they finally believe it. The second major claim comes from Sarah Bax Horton, whose work argues that the killer was a local man named Chaim Hyams. The Independent reported in 2023 that Horton identified Hyams through Victorian medical and asylum records. In that reporting, she argued that Hyams' documented physical decline and violent behavior aligned with witness descriptions and the timeline of the murders. Her argument is not built mainly on confession, evidence, or recovered forensic material. It is built on convergence. A man in the area, a history of instability, violence toward people around him, and, most importantly in her theory, distinctive physical characteristics. Popular Mechanics, citing Horton's comments to The Telegraph, says she focused on an irregular gait, difficulty straightening the knees, and asymmetrical foot-dragging traits she believes align with witness descriptions from 1888. The Independent also reported that Hyams had a history of mental illness and violent outbursts, including assaults within his family, and that his decline intensified across the same broader period as the murders. That makes Hyams an interesting suspect, but interesting is not the same as confirmed. And in an Entity Shadows documentary, that line has to stay visible at all times. This is where most documentaries lose discipline, because the temptation is obvious. Medical file plus witness statement plus timeline equals solution. But old cases do not work that cleanly. The surviving record is incomplete. Witness testimony in 1888 was inconsistent. Press contamination was constant. The suspect pool has shifted for more than a century, and multiple final solutions have already been proposed in the modern era, each with defenders, each with critics. Britannica still presents Jack the Ripper as unidentified, and notes that speculation around suspects has persisted for decades without resolution. That does not make Horton's work worthless. It makes it what it is: a serious suspect argument, not a verdict. The strongest factual phrasing is that Chaim Hyams has been advanced as a compelling suspect by Sarah Bax Horton based on medical, behavioral, and geographical interpretation of the surviving records. The weakest phrasing, and the one this script should avoid, is that Jack the Ripper has finally been identified, because that is not established by the evidence currently available in public reporting. The Ripper story is usually told backward. It begins with the killer, and only later bothers with the city. Historically, it should be the other way around. George Bernard Shaw's 1888 letter Blood Money to Whitechapel, published in the Star, mocked the sudden moral awakening of respectable society. His argument was brutal. Reformers had shouted for attention to East End misery for years, and yet it took mutilated women and newspaper terror to force the issue into the center of public life. Later reforms did come. Legislation.gov.uk shows the Housing of the Working Classes Act, 1890, formally became law on August 18th, 1890, consolidating and expanding state powers over unhealthy housing and working class accommodation. Historians often connect the Whitechapel murders to the broader pressure for reform in the East End, though it would be too simplistic to say the murders alone caused that act. That nuance matters. The murders did not single-handedly transform London, but they made it harder for respectable Britain to pretend it had not seen what industrial modernity had left behind. And that may be the most historically important part of the case, not the myth of the killer. The exposure of the conditions that made his victims so easy to endanger and so easy to misremember afterward. The world has spent more than a century trying to finish this story. That impulse is understandable. An unsolved murder disturbs people. An unsolved series disturbs them more. And an unnamed killer becomes, over time, almost impossible for culture to leave alone. So now a face appears on a cane. A suspect reemerges from hospital records, and the old machinery starts again. Could this be the answer? Could this finally be the man? Could history at last be closed? Maybe. But the factual answer, right now, is smaller than that. A recently resurfaced object has given the legend a possible face. A modern researcher has made a detailed case for one suspect, and the official status of the murders has not changed. Jack the Ripper remains unidentified, which means the most honest ending is also the most unsettling one. After all, the books, all the tours, all the suspects, all the certainty people have tried to manufacture around this case, the truth may still be what it was in 1888. 5 women are commonly linked to one killer. The city remembered the name better than the lives. And the mystery survives, not because history told us enough, but because it never did.